It's 120 miles to Connecticut. We got a full tank of gas, half a bottle of ibuprofen. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses.
Hit it.
Hello and welcome to the Thom and Joe show. I'm Joe.
I'm Tom.
And we are doing what is probably protracted story time rather than talking about the anniversary of a certain album, because we are doing the Final Fantasy Distant Worlds Volume 1.
Yes, we are.
Which is connected to everything else. What year's the anniversary of this one?
This is 2007. I want to see. Yes.
So it's not it's not a specific anniversary. This is why you don't get me to intro these things.
It is somebody's specific anniversary. It is. Hello, it's the 21st of March. Hi everyone. Happy birthday to Nobuo Uematsu, who turned 65 today, and is the reason why we're doing this.
Yes, and it's the anniversary of the day I went to one of his concerts, and it was one of the best nights of my life. So,
yeah, we'll get to that story shortly.
We'll get to all my stories. There's a specific reason we have me doing the Blues Brothers at the start of it, or us. I have not heard this edited in together.
It's going on the front. It's going on the front. It's going on you know.
Okay.
We've hit it. We've hit it. We have our dark sunglasses on. It is dark outside. We are. So yeah, we're talking about Distant Worlds music from Final Fantasy, which is a live recording of an orchestra playing music by Nobuo Uematsu, conducted by Arnie Roth. Both of these people we will get to shortly. This is essentially the opening salvo of probably the most famous video game classical music tour on the planet, which is the Final Fantasy Distant Worlds tour. This is now over a decade, nearly getting up to, well, I think they did their 15th year in Final Fantasy's 30th year, which is 2022. They have toured. They have now recorded 6 full albums of Final Fantasy music, 3 live albums under various names, and Arnie Roth's son Eric Roth has also spun off into the chamber orchestra, a New World thing, which has also got 3 albums and also tours around the world and also plays music for Final Fantasy. It's a big business these days, as we think we...
It is a big business, and it has an extensive series with history, which I can't get into the full amount of it, but like, arranged Final Fantasy albums aren't a new thing, and even like with an orchestra isn't a completely new thing. I won't say they were the first ones, because Falcom got to them way before it. I was trying to figure out like the history of who did this and why, but it's a lot of people producing things. Like Yuzo Koshiro was one of the people who worked with Falcom when they were first spitting out these arranged albums, where companies were like, oh, we can do this with our game music, okay. But I don't know if he had anything to do with it, or if Falcom just wanted to make more money. So, but then Final Fantasy came along, named such because they thought it was going to be the last game Squaresoft was going to be making. And then that became a huge success, so they also did arranged albums.
I mean,
like in the 90s.
The earliest thing I can find is Koichi Sugiyama, a man who we're not going to get too deep into his politics because yuck. He did Dragon Quest in Concert, which was recorded live in Tokyo in 1987. This has been going for a while. Like, it is not.
And it would be Dragon Quest, because Dragon Quest was the first huge JRPG.
Yeah.
To the point of, if you go back to Yakuza 0, like, there is a side quest about trying to get the latest Dragon Quest game, of course not named such, from like the Yakuza.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, Like a Dragon, the Yakuza Like a Dragon, took even bigger influence. You know, you can't talk about, and obviously we say this obviously a few days after the death of Akira Toriyama, you can't talk about modern Japanese gaming without Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest did it first, but I feel Final Fantasy has kind of done it grander. So obviously, during the 90s there were arrangement albums. For example, wasn't there was it Celtic Moon one for Final Fantasy IV?
Yeah, Final Fantasy IV Celtic Moon.
Yeah.
First there was Final Fantasy Symphonic Suite, which was Final Fantasy 1 through 3. And I don't know if this came before or after, but they did have an arranged album for Final Fantasy 3, which was more of a medieval choir sort of thing. It was kind of more of a like story, and they had a children's choir in one of the songs, and I'm not sure what else they did, but it was definitely a different textured album. And they had vocal albums based on Final Fantasy 1 through 3, and then they had the piano albums, which from 4 through like still now probably.
They did one for 15. I think there is one for 16 coming at some point, you know, and they obviously have done it for, you know, various spin-offs from Final Fantasy, including 2 for Kingdom Hearts. So, you know, it's a big industry. They obviously do loads of like arrangement albums. I mean, there's like Christmas arrangement albums. There's the Final Symphony, which is obviously a spin-off from, you know, which is approved by Square Enix, arrangements done by Uematsu, but basically does its own thing. And they've done 2 suites where the thought and the music is more arranged to be a suite of music rather than individual pieces, and that's done very well. And that sort of obviously tours around, you know, the world, although in different chunks of the world, you know. So I have to push this till later, because otherwise we're going to talk about my CD collection all day. But
we'll get in and out as we talk about the tracks and get my recommendations for stuff, because this is a good, I want to say, sample platter for like the biggest stuff. But the problem with the biggest stuff is it's already been done through a lot of places, including One Winged Angel, which is like the song that probably prompted like a lot of this.
Yeah, so I think we'll start at the beginning in terms of Uematsu. So who is Joe? Who the hell is Nobuo Uematsu?
He is the composer for Final Fantasy through at least like 10.
Yeah.
He works with them all the time, and of course they use his themes throughout. But about 10 is kind of where we stop, and it transfers over to other people at various, you know, depending on the title.
Yeah. So
he like he's mostly kind of prog influences. Like he also spun off a prog metal band called the Black Mages.
Yep.
So he kind of uses that influence, but like he kind of gets through a little bit of everything throughout the entire course of this series. And of course there's the 1-minute loops of the NES versions because limited space, but then he starts expanding a little bit, like once we get to the Super Nintendo era. And there's just so much. Even in 4, you could tell the breadth of like variety, because we have this like anthem for the Red Wings, which is this military with drums, and then we have a love theme, which is, you know, extremely sweet or bittersweet, how you choose to read it. And they just have one track for a town that's just incredible. Well, not the town, the castle itself. It's just, there's just this castle where all of the leaders are women, and he just broke out one of the most like beautiful, infectious themes he has ever made just for that. And then when they go to the moon, it's more mysterious and science fiction. So it runs the gamut of everything, and sometimes he's a little more focused, and sometimes he's not. 4 I would consider an epic score. 5 it's still epic, and it has like the battle of, the bridge.
Battle for the big bridge, which is
battle for the big bridge, yes.
Battle of the big bridge.
But it has, I don't want to say soap opera-ish, but it definitely like has its sound fonts and its more focused approach.
Yeah.
And then 6 just like goes all off on this operatic, and then with like experiments in techno and a definitely prog rock. I don't want to say glam rock, but epic prog rock, like
symphonic progressive rock, that sort of thing.
Yes,
sort of like.
So it goes through a little bit of everything, and then like the breadth of this guy's work through this singular series is incredible.
It's staggering. So regularly, obviously, Classic FM, which is a British radio station in the UK, regularly do, a top 50 or top 100 of the greatest classical pieces of music of all time. The only other composer that regularly appears in that top 50 who is, a non-classical composer, and obviously, we're not going to get into the big thing of, is video game music proper music? If you want to hear us talk about it, we did that in the Kingdom Hearts episode. We this thing sells out the Royal Albert Hall. This is, it is music, it's music. Your view of whether it fits into the classical canon or where it fits into the classical canon, I think is a little bit of a moot point when you're that beloved. I mean, the only other person who's and the obvious comparison is John Williams, who obviously again is really rejuvenated symphonic classical music as a thing in terms of, I would say, probably the under 40s.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't just sell out Albert Hall; he sells out Omaha.
We'll get to Omaha shortly. So Uematsu, a little bit of background. So he is, and obviously he's been doing a lot of press in the wake of the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth release, obviously on PS5. He is entirely self-taught. He sort of obviously is now an elder statesman of video game music. I mean, he has said in the last few days, he doesn't know if he'll do another soundtrack. I mean, the man is, as I said, today the man is 65. I mean,
And also he has been suffering severe health problems as of late.
Yeah. But essentially, he kind of leaves, being a really active point of a Final Fantasy round about the sort of the same time that the other two members, which is obviously Sakaguchi and Amano, who's obviously the character designer, etc., sort of gently dip out, which is Final Fantasy 9. He does some music for Final Fantasy 10. Some of the music for Final Fantasy 10 is really great, and he does, themes for other games. But by the time we get to, he has no involvement with Final Fantasy 13. For Final Fantasy 14, he obviously does a double-hander with Masahiro Soken, but by about the sort of early 2000s, he kind of stopped being the sole composer for Square Enix, and that's fine. At that point, the guy had been working for Square for the best part of 15 years. What he then does is he goes, right, I'm taking this on the road then.
Also, I should recommend he does go out with a bang, because he is the person in 10 who composed Otherworld.
Yeah.
Which is like a screaming metal song.
Oh yeah, the band loves
and it is legit as all hell, and it plays during water polo.
Yeah, the man can rock out like the best of them, you know, for a self-taught pianist. So we kind of start with the sort of least pronounceable album of the lot, which is 2002 02 20, which is a live, which obviously all of the majority of the things we'll be talking about today are live, essentially renditions of things that then most of the Distant Worlds albums are recorded as live, best take, etc. It's how classical music used to be recorded. So we have 2002 02 20. And it's a one-off performance of Final Fantasy music in Tokyo International Forum. A lot of these are recorded in Tokyo or Stockholm, which we'll come to shortly. A lot of this set list is quite familiar. I mean, we'll come back and talk about a lot of the music on this. A lot of this gets rehashed in Distant Worlds, and if you have...
I just want to note that like the 202, with the zeros and twos album, it was recorded live. The Distant World albums are recorded in studio. These are they aren't live cuts. Like you can tell it's an empty room. I don't know. I think I don't know if they were
just different. Yeah, definitely.
The acoustics are different, and I think that's one of the weirdest parts. I don't know if they get. I haven't didn't completely absorb myself, but hopefully they did get better. I think the first one, I don't know if they were in a hurry or a budget crunch because they still don't know if this is going to be a huge money maker.
Yeah,
but
this is basically chucked out, and it's like, right, okay, we've got to promote. We've done, we've got a tour, right? Put something out so we've got a rough. People have a product to buy. I mean, that's at the end of the day, a lot of the it is a concert series that just happens to have a release attached. I mean, some of the stuff obviously that has been played live by the orchestra as of late, is not on any release. There's arrangements that they'll do, and it's just like, oh, it's a one-off arrangement. It's like, okay, fine, brilliant. We'll see how this works. It's it's sort of like a live album, but obviously the material that they're taking from it is Uematsu's stuff. Anyway, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of the first salvo of this. Then they go and do Tour de Japan, which is basically the same thing, but the 2002 or 2002 thing is rather good. We'll tour this across Japan, and that did quite well actually. The most interesting thing about this set list is there is a thing called New Tune from Final Fantasy Advent Children, which is Cloud Smiles, which is very, very amusing because on the most... We'll talk about Cloud Smiles shortly because it does tie into your experiences, but obviously... As of Distant World 6, this has finally had a recording by the current rendition of Distant Worlds, which is kind of amusing that basically it started as this unnamed track for that. But anyway, again, the structure is not unfamiliar. It's a lot of the same music, and that's fine. And then we get Voices, which is another one-off concert. If you've ever seen the performance of One Winged Angel with the Black Mages and the full orchestra, this is where it's from. That's available on DVD. It's a very good concert. Again, some familiar material. And then we get to Dear Friends. And this is where I feel you are probably better placed than me to talk about your experiences, Joe, and people then understand why we made a Blues Brothers reference at the start of this episode.
Yes. So, Dear Friends is the first time they took this on the road to America to see how test the waters, and the waters were just fine, thanks. At least from my experience.
Yeah.
At the time, I had just gotten out of college. I had my first post-college job as an intern at Anime Insider magazine in New York. Not New York City, but just a town just near the George Washington Bridge. So they didn't have a concert in New York. They had it in Hartford, Connecticut.
Indeed.
And it just happened to be on the week of my birthday in 2005. So I asked my mom, it's okay. I am broke as a joke because I'm an intern living in New Jersey. Can you give me this as a birthday present? And my mom said yes. So I got myself a ticket. I had friends on the East Coast who were going, so we were going to meet up there. We did not wind up meeting up there until after the concert because, well, it's a story. I don't know how this happened. Maybe I slept on my eye, but when I woke up, I had a massive headache, and my eyes were red, just deep. I have been possessed by the devil, red. To fix this, I went to the bathroom and got some eye drops. What I had gotten was not the eye drops.
Oh.
They were the contact solution.
Ouch.
That did not help. That absolutely did not help. So, I get ibuprofen. I get my glasses because no way I'm wearing my fucking contacts.
Nope.
And I somehow drive us to work.
Jesus.
Where, guess what? We are cleaning out the office.
Oh, God.
Like, dusting. Hardcore dusting the office. Cleaning out the lockers, which I got a lot of good stuff out of, let me tell you. Just all of the things to make my current situation worse. So after still being on a steady diet of ibuprofen all day and getting through cleaning and, I'm the intern, so I got to do a lot of the dusting, a lot of the, get on a ladder and check out some surfaces, that have been looked at in years. And I finally get to the end of the day.
Yep.
It is cloudy as hell, so this isn't a lie. I had to wear sunglasses because my eyes were still deep red. And so I am driving to Connecticut, or from the edge of New York City, just outside of it, to Hartford, Connecticut, on a Friday evening. Now, I am going to tell you what the traffic is like from New York City to Connecticut on Friday evening. It is like trying to pour a gallon of milk into a shot glass.
Jeez.
No matter what you do, it is not going to work right. And there is just not enough room for what they're trying to do. So the concert is, I want to say, like 7:30 to 8 o'clock. I leave early-ish at about 4. I don't get there until the concert starts. Because the traffic just stops. You move 20 feet for every hour. So, and that's what you got to do until the people who work in New York City and live in Connecticut are done getting home. Needless to say, like, in the middle of these 2 hours, I gotta pee. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. And it takes me 2 hours to get from one exit to another so I can get to a damn gas station. And meanwhile, my eyes hurt. The headache's starting to come back. I've got stress from traffic. And, like, fortunately, it all works out. And I get there. And I'm walking to my seat right as they're starting the opening, which is the opening to Final Fantasy VIII. Because of course it is. The opening to Final Fantasy VIII, I should say, is the first time they put, like, real symphonic power into a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
We had Final Fantasy VII's One Winged Angel and certain other things. But Final Fantasy VII was a mostly MIDI recording. And it was just a simulacrum of symphonic. This was when they got an actual choir and they got an actual orchestra. And to quote Alan Iverson, we just talk about practice.
Yeah.
Because practice is what is happening at the beginning of Final Fantasy VIII when they're doing this opening. But we can't, dive off on that and go into that because, I hate Final Fantasy VIII worse than Spoonie. Yeah. So, we have to avoid that subject as much as we can. So I get to my seat, and then we get a message from Nobuo Uematsu that is pre-recorded. So this tells you where we are in what they're testing and if they think this will work, that they don't. It's in Hartford, Connecticut on the East Coast, a well-populated place. No reason this shouldn't sell out, and it does. But they have Uematsu just give his message and, best regards to all of the fans who came out to see this, and thank you very much. So I mean, they're not sure this is going to work yet.
Yeah, just to interject quickly though, this is a 6, 7, 8 date tour. The majority of it is in California. So there's 3 dates in California, which is obviously the big 3 cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. 1 in Illinois, which is obviously Rosemont. Obviously the Hartford, Connecticut one, which you've gone to. Atlanta, Georgia. Fort Worth, Texas, Minneapolis, and Detroit, Michigan. This is mostly California and the East Coast.
Minneapolis.
Yeah, they're basically, and obviously the Distant World, tour nowadays will literally go inland and go to Kansas City and places like that, and it will
Omaha.
And Omaha and Hawaii, I think, on a couple of occasions. It's a fairly large undertaking to take, several, to do this. The UK still has only 1 date because we only really have 1 venue that's big enough for this. But they'll track across Europe, and it'll be Stockholm, etc. It's got a lot more ambitious as of late. Which is, I think it has been matched by, the increased, interest in this. Anyway, sorry, Joe.
It's okay. So, I get there, I'm having a grand old time, and then we get to the intermission. And, just looking around for people, trying to find, the people I was supposed to get in touch with when I got there. I get stopped by one of the ushers. Yes, he says, "This stuff's incredible. Could you tell me what this is about?" And by then, obviously, I'm not wearing my sunglasses into the hall or the concert. So I have no idea why he picked out me. I guess it's just because I didn't have anybody with me who had the eyes of somebody addicted to meth. Let's just put it that way. And talk like I do right now, where my mind backs over itself with a truck after trying to fix what sentence I'm going to say out loud. And with undiagnosed ADHD, where I am just rambling and going, I have no idea why this person selected me to explain all of Final Fantasy. Especially considering every single game is significantly different from the other ones. And I just have to do the best I can. I don't even remember what I said. I just rambled a whole bunch, kind of like what I'm doing at the end of this story. So we do the rest of the concert, and obviously they do One Winged Angel at the end, and blah, blah, blah. There's no meet and greet, there's no anything at the end, so everybody just goes home. I get to meet with my friends, and then I get into my car, and then I get to the first stoplight on my way home, And then, ironically, a repair truck, like at the stop sign, is backing up to run through the parking lots instead of going through the traffic light. It backs into me.
Oh.
And I'm spending the next hour, like, trying to get, police here or trying to get something arranged. And also, I have my housemates waiting for me at the Paramus Mall in very outskirts New York next to... Oh, it's the Palisades, not the Paramus. The Palisades Mall, right next to, like, New York, New Jersey border, because they've been doing that all day while I am going on this, because we carpool. So they are waiting for me. I am home very late and with a slight dent in my front end. And, that is my entire roller coaster of a Dear Friends concert. I will say, the concert was pretty great. They had local talent. Like, they would have Dear Friends played by a high school kid, maybe early college, like, guitar, expert. Like, acoustic guitar. And they have certain parts of that, but they didn't really, have any of the extra things that would be come to expected for at least the major city showings of Distant Worlds. Like, they would have certain guest choir people or, opera vocalists or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, did they have the screens at that point? Because obviously, like, one of the big things
Yeah, they did have the screens, and just like the Distant World concerts now, it's a bunch of footage of the game, and it's not really synced up, especially the NES versions, where they can just show certain battles or like an airship or the field. You can't really show much with NES games.
Yeah,
unless they made a new version with CG, like with Final Fantasy IV. When they did the DS version, they had the cinematics, which were all in the intro, and they didn't put any in the game to fool you into buying it, thinking, oh, this is going to be all throughout the game. I'm sure. No.
And like FF6 on the PS1, where it had like the CG intro. Obviously, with certain games they have like, and obviously in certain games they've gone, we'll put some Amano art up. Look, Amano art, isn't it amazing? It's pan and scan. But no, with us obviously, and obviously with the more recent stuff, particularly with the music from. Particularly when they do the songs from Final Fantasy XIV, it is just here's the animatic which you get for this song in the game. Up thumb. A brilliant, well done. So, shall we talk very briefly about my experience with my first Distant Worlds concert?
Go.
The year is 2017, some 12 years after Joe's experience. Final Fantasy is enjoying its 30th anniversary, and I'm in London because I thought, hey, why, with my mother, with basically, I thought, let's go and have a look at this pop-up Final Fantasy thing. I'm sure there'll be, oh my god, there's a massive queue. I say, this is not good. I will have to consider whether I want to be in a massive queue for a day. We turn the corner. We bump into two of my best friends in the middle of London, who obviously, I have no idea they're in London, etc. It's like, hey, they, and obviously, this is a friend called Cat and Sarah. Hello, Cat and Sarah, if you're listening to this. And we basically, eventually, we sort of wend our way across London. I say goodbye to my mum. My friends say, hey, we're going to the Final Fantasy concert. We're going to try and get tickets for the Final Fantasy concert because they, like me, have gone, this queue is ridiculously long, and it seems to be they basically do a pop-up for Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy 30th anniversary. Ironically, I now have the mugs that were like the big selling point of this Final Fantasy. There's like a load of merch, and hey, it's London, and hey, there's a Final Fantasy concert in town on the same day. Anyway, we get to the Royal Albert Hall, we go, hey, there's still tickets available for the matinee. We end up sitting above the orchestra. That is my first experience of Distant Worlds. it's still great. I think I still have the ticket somewhere around. It's, you know, hey, here's the orchestra. We don't, obviously, because we are basically sitting to one side of the orchestra and, you know, the big screen is there. We don't really see very much of the visual element, but hey, it was 20 quid. The Royal Albert Hall is a great institution. I will defend it to the hill. I have subsequently gone and done about 3 or 4 of them since. Every single time it's in London. The Royal Albert Hall is a great venue for Distant World. For one particular reason, they have one of the largest organs in the world, which allows them to play Dancing Mad every time they are in town. It's kind of ridiculous.
And I'm sure they insist on it, because I get to play the organ in Albert Hall.
I mean, it's one of the few places, like, in Europe that has an organ big enough to play. Basically, it requires a certain size of organ, and when that organ is on and going, the whole building is just gently reverberating. It's that sort of power. It's ridiculous.
I'm wondering if they're ever gonna, like, say, can we record the final boss for Lightning Returns music, because that is just an insane organ theme. It's just like this one organ melody over and over and over again, and then before it just gets gradually more insane. And I don't think you could replicate it in a live performance. But I would love it if they tried.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the key thing with the Distant Worlds is in certain cases they are rendering a piece of music which is obviously not arranged for a symphonic setting into a symphonic setting. You know, for example, certain tracks and, like, Genova, for example, which turns up on Distant Worlds 2, which we're not be talking about today, is basically drum and bass, and it's sort of quite cute to watch, to hear an orchestra try and, like, do, Amen Break Jungle sort of drum and bass loops. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that you do mention the Friends and Dear Friends concert, because at this point in the Dear Friends concert, Uematsu kind of meets his the other key figure at this point, and obviously he becomes the conductor for the Final Fantasy touring things from this point onwards, and that is a gentleman called Arnie Roth.
who has been in music for a long time. I was looking up his history just before this, and he worked on Styx's Cornerstone for string arrangements.
Yep.
And he's been with the Christmas orchestral people. Why did I forget their name?
Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I could imagine.
Oh no! Wait! It's not Trans-Siberian. The people before that.
Oh God. Not Mannheim Steamroller.
Mannheim Steamroller. He's worked with Mannheim Steamroller.
God. Yeah. Again, a band I could imagine Uematsu happily playing with. It's like, put that man in front of him. Yeah. That sort of very, not particularly self-aware, but very sincere, sort of like symphonic rock, sort of, the sort of I suppose we could probably describe Mannheim Steamroller as like an American answer to something like ELO or something. Anyway. Yes. Anyway, Uematsu and basically goes, because Uematsu was conducting these things at the beginning, and then it's like, oh hey Arnie Roth, can you come and conduct this? And it's been like that ever since. Yeah.
And even if Uematsu's not there, you can still get something signed by Arnie Roth.
Yeah. I say this. I booked tickets for the Final Fantasy Rebirth concert. And Arnie Roth is also conducting that. I mean, he's basically the in-house guy, I swear, for most of Square Enix. Because I think when they did the Hate Kingdom Hearts concerts, he is also conducted for those. So he gets about.
If I may, So, if you want to go into a deep dive on this and want to get a really good, or listen to one, because it's on YouTube, they had to split into parts though.
Yep.
There is the German version of Symphonic Fantasies. They do have a Tokyo one, which has you get it on CD. Which is fine. It is a drier version of the German one, which goes hard. It is a bunch of suites of some of the best SNES, PlayStation 1 video games. Like they have Chrono Trigger, they have Secret of Mana, there's Kingdom Hearts on there, which is technically PS2, but they have suites of those, and they are some of the best suites I have ever heard put together for video game music. And I'm not normally a suite person. When we discussed the individual tracks, but it is great. The German performances is great. You can find it on YouTube. It's unfortunately split into parts because that's when it was uploaded to YouTube, when they could split things into 10 minutes at most before all of YouTube became 6-hour video essays. But so it's there. Have a listen. It is great.
Yeah, the
arranger conducted by Arnie Roth.
The composer, the arranger for that, which is a Finnish gentleman by the name of, God, I hope I pronounced his name, Joni Valtonen, is also the guy who does the Final Symphony things, and it is a very similar style of thing, although it is focused upon the Final Fantasy game, where it is, it's not individual pieces, it is, do this as a suite, a connected pieces, a connected group of music that is, all of that, and, he very, very well done, there's obviously symphonic, well, sorry.
And I can't say this anymore because we are in a different landscape than what we used to be, but it is also very good and very cheap. And
it's Deutsche Grammophon. It's Deutsche Grammophon because it is the masters of recording and releasing proper classical, and that I think was the moment I thought where video game music had made it, because it's like, okay, no, you're on Deutsche Grammophon. You are on the classical label. We've made it. That sort of thing. And obviously, Volton does a load of really good video game music. He's done stuff for Zelda, etc. He is probably the master of doing this. Taking video game music and transforming it into something that a more typical classical music fan would understand as a symphonic suite. Anyway.
So this isn't the ending to Tar, is what we're saying.
Yeah, no, it's well, as I said, I haven't actually seen Tar yet. That's also Monster Hunt. That's also Monster Hunt. So by the way, no, I know.
Okay, it's been a year, okay, but you'll know why there's a certain credit at the beginning of Tar at the end, and I get what it means to say metaphorically, but it still kind of feels like it's a slight to us who've been I've been thighs deep in this stuff for decades, since the early 2000s, when I had disposable income, and then I searched for stuff on eBay, and it's like, oh, they have piano albums. What do these sound like? And the internet's finally getting to this place where we can have Napster and all of these things.
Oh god.
So,
I mean, we've only just got to a point in which in about the last 18 months, 2 years, where a lot of this stuff has now officially rolled up on Spotify. Obviously it is now accessible officially to a wider audience. Anyway, where should we start with this CD? I think a general overview.
I like a general overview. I'm gonna say this is probably the grandest. These are the ones that are easiest to put into a symphonic orchestra, because either the original idea was made for this, or it has a certain grandness. Or basically it was already arranged in previous albums, which I will get into piece by piece.
Oh, completely. The biggest sort of like the biggest overview I would say is across this and Distant Worlds 2, which is called More Music for Final Fantasy. This is like the majority of the repertoire that they had from the various concert series. Done as a studio recording without audience participation, etc. We basically get, I would say, the majority of the really, really famous pieces of music. I think when we initially were talking about doing the Distant Worlds thing, it was a question, a little bit of a problem with going, how do you pick one of these? And I think our solution of the first one is probably the best. We could go into massive detail about Distant Worlds 2. Distant Worlds 2 is basically the other half of this, if you consider them as like a double album of this is the majority of the stuff that they had either wanted to do and then managed to do in a symphonic setting, or this is stuff from the Dear Friends, the other tours, etc., that they had pretty much ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and a lot of it will be, I mean, I don't want to complain, but it's just like, I have heard, even back then when this first came out, I have heard arranged versions of multiple of these, 2 or 3 different arrangements by this point. So
completely,
it is very familiar to the people, but that's because they are the most well known, and it's
this is the greatest hits, basically.
The greatest hits, and these are the biggest moments from the Final Fantasies.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if the opening, the bombing mission from Final Fantasy VII, which is the opening track here, it isn't the greatest track, but it is the moment Final Fantasy became its modern rendition, because it is the opening to Final Fantasy VII after the Super Nintendo games, where they just have it starts off with Aerith in the streets, and then it keeps panning out into this train, and then there's this whole new city, and it's just this incredible cinematic thing which we had never seen before, we had never heard before, even with the soundtrack limitations.
The opening sequence
blew everybody's it blew everybody's mind when it came out.
Yeah, the opening sequence to Final Fantasy VII still holds up 27 years later. It is such a statement of intent. It's like, okay, right, compared to opening Final Fantasy is one of my favourite moments of video game history. It's just, it is it's with Uematsu's music, with Terra's theme that actually appears on Distant Worlds 2. It's this moment of, quiet contemplation. Final Fantasy VII goes, watch this.
Yes, and they've eventually been moving up to cinematic presentation, and they get pretty decent at it in 6. This is above and beyond anything they had ever done. So this is kind of being the opening track is kind of what made what follows possible.
Yeah, definitely. Ironically, I mean, it's a very good rendition of Bombing Mission. Bombing Mission is, again, one of these pieces of music that sort of, has... Basically, I feel it's... with that, when you sort of consider how effective that visual is, it's like, the that sort of, synthesizer run. It's kind of, again, you sort of forget how impactful that opening that opening sequence is, and sort of Cloud's introduction. Interesting thing, this was used on the demo trailer version of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because they basically had a placeholder music, and it went, right, okay, oh, we've got a symphonic version ready to go. Brilliant.
I wonder how many people went, oh, they're just going to take, stuff they've already recorded. And then they released Final Fantasy VII Remake, and there is, 8 CDs of music?
9 CDs on the special edition.
I've got 9 on special edition, okay.
I've got the music, and I've got the FF Can you tell because I'm going to the Final Fantasy? I've got the sound. I love video game soundtracks.
Okay.
I collect too many of them.
Me too.
It's a very good, it's a very good soundtrack. But yeah, this is going. Where better to start this symphonic, rendition of Final Fantasy in this format than where we basically started, generally. I find myself actually with surprisingly little else to say about it. It's just a very good rendition of Bombing Mission. It's very good. It's great.
It kind of, after you get the opening and then you get to Bombing Mission, it kind of loses its effect without the visuals, which is why they have the visual aid at the concert. But it's good. Like I said, if I hadn't played through Final Fantasy VII 5 times and kind of know this front and back, and the first 5 hours of the game are kind of slow to me because let me open up the world, let me get out of this boring city, and then the boring city became the entire first third of the remake.
Attack while its tail is up. No, don't, you stupid translator, etc. And then we get to then we kind of basically get my view on 8 is very I've never played 8. I own 8. I've never played it. I don't really have a particular view on it. I do find Squall an annoying punchable thing, but I think that's basically a default thing. That said, the 3 FF8. The only thing I will very quick aside. The only thing I will say against Distant Worlds is this is 13 tracks long. 6 of those are either from Final Fantasy 7 or 8. And it's sort of basically, obviously, this balancing act has, I feel, been the one problem with Distant Worlds is that it tends to go for the crowd pleasing numbers, and occasionally some of the deeper cuts do sort of get a little bit lost in the mix. It tends to be a series that leans towards the popular Final Fantasy games get a lot of the music, everything else sort of crowds in at the back and tries to get in the photograph, for lack of a better term.
And there is a little odd thing about it because the Japanese love Final Fantasy X, and which is why you get so many deep cuts from Final Fantasy X. And I didn't believe this when I was told it at one of the Distant Worlds concerts.
Yep.
And then I played the online Theatrhythm game, and at the time I was up, they only had Japanese people up. So every time, all of them would select Final Fantasy X, and it wouldn't be Otherworld. It would just be Seymour's theme or something like that. And they actually did a poll, for the Japanese, what tracks would you like on Distant Worlds? And Seymour's theme won. And even they, Uematsu and Arnie Roth were like, well,
really?
Okay, if that's what you want. I mean, it's fine, but it's it is. I can't hum it. I struggle to figure out remember what this sounds like, and I was a huge Final Fantasy music nerd.
Yeah.
Or I still am. I just I've been behind and I'm broke and I can't afford 9 CDs at a time.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, so they do a lot of crowd pleasing, and it's a lot of stuff that is ready to go. Yeah. Because Liberi Fatale, which is the Final Fantasy VIII opening,
ominous chanting and everything.
It was already arranged because originally it was already arranged for orchestra and choir, and also it was put on the Final Fantasy VIII arranged album, Thefos Lusek Wikos Vinosek. Hopefully I got all of that at least 95% correct.
Which is a lyric from Liber Fatale. Fatale,
Liberi Fatale. Yeah. So a lot of the arrangements are from that, and will I'll have more to talk about this when we do Fisherman's Horizon. So those were already ready to go, and we had Final Fantasy VII reunion tracks, which I don't want to fool you into it's fully symphonic. It is 3/4 of straight Final Fantasy VII tracks, and then at the end they have 3 Final Fantasy VII tracks, fully recorded by orchestra. So 3 or 4, I can't fully remember, but just going down the list, and Don't Be Afraid was one of the ones off of the 2 and Zeros album. Theme of Love was one that has been done a lot from Final Fantasy IV. It's Theme of Love practically was on every Final Fantasy IV arranged album, and it's just a very easy and wonderful thing to do. And and other such things. So it's just like a lot of this is stuff they have had for a while, and they know how to do it. So this is, if you're going to take a tenuous step, more confident, go with what you know, and this is the first one is.
That said, I really do like this rendition of Libera Fatale. It is very, that sort of Durman strong that sort of John Williams actually was doing a few years before. I don't know whether Uematsu was like vaguely aware of like Duel of the Fates. It does have that sort of vague same, Latin chanting and slightly ominousness. It's a great piece of music. It really is it's really quite ominous, and again, it's another opening piece of music. It's another, hey, this is the opening FMV of the game. It's fine. As I said, I weirdly enough, I find 8's score quite good, although it is one of these, I wonder to what extent that is because, 8 is really the first Final Fantasy game that was able to do, full reproduction of sound and wasn't doing, MIDI controllers and all gubbins like that.
And Uematsu's, whatever samples Uematsu had for 6, which are crazy. Final Fantasy VI is my favorite Final Fantasy soundtrack, and it is just crazy the amount of variety they get on it, and the samples they use, and just how it gets around its limitations.
Yeah, the only soundtrack of the SNES era, I think, that really... there's probably 2 or 3 video game soundtracks I think rival 6. One of them is Earthbound. For that era of gaming, Earthbound is one of them, and I think Chrono Trigger is the other one. And Uematsu,
and I would add, what I would add to that is Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is easily top 5 video game soundtrack. It is just lush and beautiful, and it's more piano centered. But Chrono Trigger, you can't go wrong with that, and like. As you were trying to say before I rudely interrupted you, Uematsu did a good part of the soundtrack with Yasunori Mitsuda.
Yeah. So that's 1 and a bit out of the 4 greatest soundtracks of that 32-bit game era are Nobuo Uematsu, and 3 of the 4 of them are from Square Enix. Which is Square at that point, but obviously, it's insane the run they were on, and particularly in terms of soundtracking in that sort of mid-90s, in that sort of early to mid-90s period.
And I would also add Final Fantasy IV just because it was one of the first blasts of, we can do something greater, and we can do stuff that affects your mood. Not that video game stuff didn't have music and stuff, but this was where one of the first points where I would literally stop and listen to the music and this scene's too short. No, I need to listen to this whole thing. And I need to reset the game and go through the start again for 5 minutes just to listen to this theme of love that is for less than 30 seconds of dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, some of the to return briefly to 6. Obviously, we'll get to 6 shortly because it's got the Final Fantasy 6, which the stuff that Uematsu was doing. I mean, there's speech synthesis in this, and it's he's pushing the cartridge to its absolute limits in terms of getting the best soundtrack out of it. He can. Track 3, it's Aerith's theme. if you do not like Aerith's theme, there is the door. Goodbye.
Okay. We need to keep our wits together because we want to avoid spoilers. But also, an interesting moment. I did get to this. They did play this at the concert I was at March 21st, 2013 in Omaha at Uematsu's birthday. They played Aerith's theme, obviously. There was a guy who just stood up in the middle of it when, the big scene with Aerith happens. And he holds out his hand like he wants to, grab his waifu, I suppose. And that was a moment. The friend of mine who went with me to the concert got instead. I was like a few rows in front of him because we had gotten our tickets at different times, and that thing sold like wildfire. And we were, by the time he had gotten to it, there had been a dozen rows that had sold out before that.
Jesus. Yeah, but that's the power of Uematsu's music at base. It's like it is that that sort of tangible link back to I mean, there's like every single piece of music on this is hey, do you remember this moment from the game? Do you remember the first time? There's a really good article, I'm going to link it below, about Bandcamp, which is obviously on the website Bandcamp, which sort of puts bombing mission into context and goes do you remember, and the way it sort of almost Proustian link back to, do you remember the first time you played Final Fantasy VII and this opening sequence? That's the power of music at its best, and that's where people will make very tangible links back to the games and their childhood and how that a particular moment in a game made them feel. This is my favorite version of Aerith's theme.
Okay. I can hardly tell a lot of the differences. I can, on our next one, I can definitely parse out stuff. But it is a very beautiful and sorrowful, bittersweet kind of theme. Obviously, because it deals with like this pure soul and what happens to her. She dies. Okay, like she does.
In the original, I need to add in. I'd have to add very importantly in the original. We neither of us have played. I don't think you've played Rebirth, have you, Joe?
I played I'm halfway through the first third of the remake, but I'm getting bogged down by all the extra stuff. So it's pretty good, but it's just like it has so much extra things that to bulk up time and to I know they want to expand the world, and it's great that they like realized it as an actual living space, but it's just like it's too much. Everything is too much.
Rebirth. I haven't played Rebirth anyway. I have played the remake but not Rebirth. I think it's a very good game, and I do like the versions of the obviously the reorchestrations of a lot of the game music. I mean, it's Aerith's theme. It regularly appears on the Classic FM, top 15, 20 tracks of all time. We could talk about Aerith's theme and for about 20 minutes.
And it has the most emotion because it is the first time people felt something while playing a video game. That's because, and that hit a wide audience because Final Fantasy VII sold a ton in comparison to the previous titles.
And a lot of that emotional impact undoubtedly has to do, even in the crude rendition of the the MIDI tracker of the early PlayStation. A lot of that cannot be attributed to anyone but Uematsu. Anyway,
even if like everybody and their mother, when the PC version of FF7 just like loaded up better MIDI samples like the moment that hit. and they would share it online. Like, here's like the better version, like the perfected version, or whatever else when that came to PC.
Patch it quickly. Anyway, Fisherman's Horizon. It's
lead me to this one.
Okay.
Lead me to this one because in Final Fantasy VIII, it is a town. I can't remember what all happens in it, but the original track is fully synthetic keyboard. Like, it is meant to be played by a synthetic keyboard. And when we get to Thefos Lusek, or I'll just call it the Final Fantasy VIII arranged album, they bulk it up with a choir and an orchestra, but they keep that synthetic sound like it is a bright synthetic electric noise. It is a lot of Final Fantasy VIII is intentionally like electric and feels synthetic because it goes with the way the world is. Like it's more advanced. People have guns. They have gun blades. They they have satellite dishes, and a lot of the plot revolves around who they can talk to on these giant televisions around the world, and it's overall a step up. So it is very electronic. Yeah. Even like the Fisherman's Horizon, which has like a giant solar panel in the middle of it, or at least a series of solar panels, a farm. That's the word. So like even in this quiet town where they get their name through fishing, it has this electronic sparkle to it. I think that's missing in this symphonic version. I like the arranged version off of 8 better because one, they keep that bright, warm synthetic noise. Like it doesn't feel like it is a synth keyboard and it's like it's a dull thud or it's menacing. It feels warm and great. And they switch that to like strings and the flute, which it works. It's good. It just it lacks a certain something. And then at the end, when the choir calms down and they sing the end of it, the 8 version has like a murmur that is like so much better than the end of this, because this version does get quiet for the ending point as the song kind of ends, but it doesn't have like I said, the arranged version is warmer instead of a straight symphonic version.
Yeah.
So if you want to look for the ideal version of the track, Thefos Lusek, the Final Fantasy VIII arranged album, that's the one you want to look for, and it is... I hate Final Fantasy VIII. That track is great. So seek that out if you like what you hear here.
The two things, I would say definitely of the like, there's nothing on Distant Worlds music for Final Fantasy that is below good. This is the one I feel where the symphonic setting does sort of lean it back. If you had all of this and then that synthesizer line in there as well, or an electronic organ or something representing that, great. You have got probably the best. There is, occasionally there are pieces of music where I feel it's sort of like the having to set it into a symphonic choral setting, does sort of lose elements of it, particularly on the sort of rockier and, more less, traditionally classical pieces of music. Really weird little side on this. Noctis's voice actor from Final Fantasy 15, I would listen to this every day when he had to do sad scenes, apparently. So that's just a random. Ray Chase would just like driving his car and listen on loop, on loop as one does. It's a good. Speaking and staying on the topic of Final Fantasy VIII, the next track is "Don't Be Afraid." This is the final of the 3 Final Fantasy VIII tracks. This is.
It's not the final of them. There's still another one to come.
Oh God, is this
at least?
Yeah. Oh God, there's 4. Sorry, my apologies, I miscounted. There's 4 Final Fantasy VIII tracks on this. That's like a a fourth of the season, a third.
I miscounted the men, Liz. I miscounted the men.
Anyway, yeah, I like the thing is, as I said, I think this is the thing that the thing I think this emphasizes is, you know, video game music can stand on its own, and if you have good video game music, sometimes it can transcend a really, really not particularly good game.
I have my thoughts, and I have a lot of them. My main thing is this was just a demonstration, again, a demonstration of how far they've come in being able to do this, and I think that hurts the original composition to the fault, because all of this is like, here's this part, and then we can do this part, and it winds around each the composition, but I never think it builds on it. Like, there is obviously the point at the end where it feels like it's supposed to build to a climax, but all of these elements feel like they're like solo pieces. Like, it's the orchestral version of like the solo part where you'll just, you know, point to whoever band person, and then this person will do like their excited battle version, and then this person, but it doesn't connect. It isn't a full part, and this seems way too much for like the main battle theme, especially once you learn how to break the game, and like the battles will end in an instant, and it'll just be this one puff of excitement, and then the victory theme, which will be on
Distant Worlds 2. Distant Worlds 2.
Yeah, which is, you know, the second half, but
yeah, the shortest of all Final Fantasy tracks at a mighty 8 seconds long.
And if you have a choir, they will put in the lines, "Yippee for me, here's our victory."
Oh god, that's glorious.
That's what they are saying. Like, I don't know. I don't remember if I looked up a lyric somewhere, or if it was on closed captioning or something, but yep, "Yippee for me, here's our victory" is what the choir says when they do that. They'll
usually end, like, they'll do a medley of like battle themes, and then they'll go da 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 right at the end, which is a nice little touch. They have done it like on its own, and it's like this is a polite applause after like 9 seconds of music. Don't be afraid, he's fine. It's, you know, the only thing I'd say against the Distant Worlds thing is they don't tend to do a lot of the battle themes live, and I think a lot of it is because of the sort of the a lot of the battle themes in Final Fantasy are great, but they are, you know, intended to be on a loop, you know, and it's like you know, that sort of thing, you know, and it's like, the boss themes, obviously, which obviously do tend to crop up a lot in the Distant Worlds things, are great. The boss themes sort of, like, I feel tend to, you know, the actual battle themes tend to be put into medleys, which is, I think, fine. I think it's the best way of doing them.
Also, the big thing about the boss themes is they tend to use a lot of electronic influence on them. Like, Genova is one they've put into symphonic form, and I think it's missing something from its science fiction
drum and bass
electronic, because this is a drum and bass, and like, there's the final boss battle in Final Fantasy IV, which the thing about that is the backbone of it is an ominous little, like, synth line underneath it that's just like this organ, this electric organ sound that is just menacing, and it literally just kind of sends a little chill up your spine. I don't know if that was the intent, but it's just like that little extra menace that adds so much to the bombastic nature of it.
Yeah, and some of it, like, works, which we'll obviously get to right when we get to the bottom. Some of it works perfectly in symphonic, you know, things like Battle on the Big Bridge, you know, the Four Fiends. It will just, it just fits it like a glove, and it's like, yeah, this is good. And then we get sort of, I think, the deepest cut on this, which is the Final Fantasy 11 stuff. I mean, you got to obviously remember this point, like Final Fantasy 11 was like a going concern. It was like their big money spree. But these tracks are like comparatively, I mean, they don't do them a lot in concert these days. The piece they tend to do from 11 nowadays is Ronofore, which is a really nice bit of Uematsu. And still a deep cut, but I think is one of Uematsu's best bits for 11. So this is a medley of Memoro de Stono and Distant Worlds. Good, yeah, good pieces of music.
I will say this is my favorite track on the album. It might be just by default because, like, by this point, I know all of these tracks by heart. I could literally hum all of them and the loop forever if needs be.
Yeah.
I did not play Final Fantasy 11 because I do not do online games well. I've tried Final Fantasy 14. I get social anxiety, and I've had like multiple bouts where I've nearly had a panic attack. And I know on my brain level that I didn't do anything wrong. I was just a newbie. Like the mansion in Final Fantasy 14, if you've ever done it, like originally how it is set up, you have to, after you finish one of these sections, you have to press /return and then go back to the beginning and then go finish the stage. I did not know to do this, and I did not. I played it on a PlayStation 4, so I was using a controller and not a and I didn't have like my keyboard on me at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't know to do this, and like it's kind of where they did it, the end of the thing without me, and I just kind of didn't know how to apologize, and that was like my first panic attack. The second is when I had it on a computer for the free demo, blah 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 blah, and then my CPU started wigging out and shut the computer off in the middle of a plot-centric quest, and I got a black mark on that. And I'm like, oh my god, it's just like, oh my god, I keep failing these people so badly, and I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure nobody remembers, but it's just like, I still get that anxiety on playing with other people, and then I have people claustrophobia where I feel like all of these people are going to trap me and keep me alone by myself away from other people, and I'm surrounded by these people who don't give a shit who I am, and that's fine because there are millions of people on there, but it's just like, it does not reverberate on my mental health very well, and I may need to work on it, I may not need to work on it, but I tend to stay away from it, and so that's why I don't do that. But back to this after Joe's sad corner time. I
finished a run reborn. I have a small cat boy. He is beautiful. I love him. Hello, Isla.
Yeah.
my friend is playing with it. I love these two pieces. The 11 soundtrack is like the deepest cut, I think, of, like, you know, obviously Soken has become, you know, everyone goes, oh, Final Fantasy 11, Final Fantasy 14, brilliant soundtrack. Yeah, it's a really good soundtrack, undoubtedly. 11 soundtrack is also really good, and nobody ever talks about it.
Well, it's also a case of a lot of the online stuff is like you hear it over and over. Like my problem with 14 is you will hear the same like 6 themes over and over again for hundreds of hours, because you have to go back to the, you know, your base, and then you have to go to the areas around it. And like when I played Theatrhythm, like the first 3 are obviously the 3 home bases you can pick between, because they didn't want to pick one, and you have to complete those to get to the next stage. And I'm like, can we just get to the damn good stuff? Can we get to the deeper cuts? You're really deep into Final Fantasy 14 and these parts that are supposed to be orgasmically good that I haven't gotten to because I have to do this grindy work to get through the first episode.
I will say I absolutely adore the Limsa Laminsa theme, but I would because I started there. The stuff that's another thing. You know, the Theta Rhythm has, you know, gone. Theta Rhythm, I think, if nothing else, indicates boy howdy, Final Fantasy soundtrack is a massive USP of the series at this point. Yeah. It's like, hey, here's a game that's based upon playing a rhythm action game, which is just the Final Fantasy music.
And I played about 40-50 hours of the most recent one, and I think I just got to halfway through the quests.
Jesus.
Which opens all of the tracks. And that may be just because I got a couple of the DLCs and I was like trying to master like some of my favorite stuff. But to this track individually, I made an MP3 cut on my old one because Memoro dello Stono is fine. I want to get immediately to Distant Worlds.
Oh, God, yes.
Because it is an absolutely stunningly beautiful version of this song, and the way the orchestra works off each other, the way the choir works off each other is just incredible. I have the first version. I got it, off the Apple iTunes store when Final Fantasy put everything on there, so it is a good song. This is incredible. And I want to say, like, for this individual thing, this was before they had their Distant Worlds Orchestra, who is the team they travel with, and they had this specific orchestra, and they had a separate choir. I think they're Swedish, and this vocalist.
Yeah, so this is the vocalist on this is Susan Calloway. Susan Calloway.
Oh, it is Susan Calloway? Okay.
Yeah, who's basically become Uematsu and latterly Masahiro Soken's like vocalist of choice. So she does all of the songs for I think this is the first point at which Uematsu worked with her, because she would then go on to do the opening song for Final Fantasy 14 and basically every expansion up to Stormblood. So we basically, somebody who is in there for like, at the beginning. And I mean, Answers isn't on this series, but Answers is probably top 5 of the greatest pieces of music Uematsu has ever written. And Susan Calloway is bang in the middle of the center of that track.
Okay. It's the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra is the people who did this.
The Stockholm concerts.
Amana Sangan. I don't know. I think that might be the vocalist I was thinking of. I don't know if.
Possibly. Yeah. No, absolutely. She is.
I got a separate name than Susan Calloway on the vocalist for this, and I don't know if just my memory played tricks on me or what, but like I said, Distant Worlds is absolutely incredible, especially when like you hear the choirs like chanting behind her, and they are at some points acting as the music for her, and just like it elevates it so much, especially near the end when she gets the second singing of the chorus, and they are like responding or repeating, and you just hear like the choir just like it hums so beautifully with with her singing her heart out. And then there's the like, I don't want to call it harmonizing, but when they're just playing, they're responding underneath, and the way they bounce off each other so incredibly well, and it's incredible.
Yeah. Just to go back very briefly to Memori de Stono. Memori de Stono is in Esperanto.
Okay.
It's in Esperanto. I think it's one of the few pieces of video game music I know of that is in Esperanto. Which is an artificial language invented in the late 19th century. It's like a European language. Which is just neat. I don't know if it's in Esperanto on the original thing or it's just a stylistic thing. It's fine. Distant Worlds blows it out of the water. And obviously names this entire tour and glorious things, and it's one of the highlights of Distant Worlds. I love it when they do it live. And then we get the medley. The medley is great.
Yeah, the medley again. I will have to go to my deep expertise on this, because if you go back to Final Fantasy Symphonic Suite, there are better symphonic versions of each individual tracks because they are given room to breathe. Now, it's a symphonic suite, so they're still suites, but they are longer, and it's an entire album. And sometimes they get interrupted by a drum machine because I don't know if they didn't have a drummer or if they did have a drummer and he just had to do this like one beat over and over for an entire 4-minute track. But so you will occasionally hear that like they didn't have it all put together, but there are, wonderful little bits from Final Fantasy 1 through 3. The Maiden of Water and
So it consists of, in rough order, obviously the Prelude. This is the only time I think the Prelude has actually been done for Distant Worlds as far. No, they did it on. No, apologies. They did it on.
Yeah, they did.
They did it on the very next album in full length.
Yes.
The Prelude is lovely. I mean, it's the key.
The steps.
The steps, absolutely. And then the main theme of Final Fantasy, which again has been done in full in subsequent, what it closes every concert now. That's the thing, the do 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 that piece of music. And Matoya's Cave from Final Fantasy, Elia, the Maiden of Water, and the Chocobo theme. Again, we'll get a longer version of that on, I think it's Distant Worlds 3 or 4.
They're going to get a longer version on this album, Tama.
There's a longer version of this album, but they do like so many versions of the Chocobo. I think there's about 2 or 3 versions of the Chocobo.
Because Uematsu himself does a different version every time. Like there was techno, swing, just like banjo version. Every genre.
Yeah, there's so many.
Even metal. Even metal
Chocobos are very metal. And then the Rebel Army theme from Final Fantasy 2, which closes out the Rebel Army version theme. There's an interesting thing because I think what they did is obviously like on subsequent releases, I think the Chocobo theme got swapped out for something. I mean, so when they did it live on the Returning Home, they kept the medley but then dropped in like something else. I think they put the opening theme or something in. This is the piece of music they tend to muck up. They chop and change. Obviously now the Chocobo theme is obviously elsewhere. It's a great little medley. It's probably the only I think it's the only time apart from the where they've split it out into individual pieces, which tend to be like the main themes of Final Fantasy. They've really done music from 1, 2, and 3. There's not really, 1, 2, and 3 are basic, and I think that basicness occasion.
I wouldn't call them basic because they were pretty complex for their time and pretty incredible, absolutely. Especially if you get some of the some of the cuts from 2 and 3, but they are meant to loop after 40 seconds. Yeah. So they are fairly short in their compositions.
Yes, and a lot of it has been done, since, or Uematsu has come back and reused that piece of music to do some, he's basically he's taken a recurring theme for the piece of music and put it somewhere else in the in the series. And obviously we've had Distant Worlds versions of some of those as well.
And then we've had like the remakes of the music themselves, like in the Pixel versions. They used to call it Pixel Perfect, but they aren't. But the Pixel remakes. They add sections to the songs, especially from the NES era, and they'll have little ditties and extensions put onto the tracks, so they feel like more extended songs. Which, you can argue necessary or unnecessary, but it's kind of neat to first stumble into, and it's like, wait, there is this new part of the song I've never heard before, and like it makes it feel like you're playing it for the first time again, or somewhat. Even if you played the game 30 times like I have on 4 and 6.
Yeah, it's a nice touch, and when we get to a particular piece of music, the Pixar remake or remasters really do something very, very cool with one piece of music in particular, for Final Fantasy VI. We'll get to that one shortly. Next up is Theme of Love, which is beautiful.
It is absolutely beautiful. It is. Like I said, it is the moment when I started to notice music in video games.
Yeah.
Besides the ADHD, I get everything stuck in my head kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously, when I played, oh god, that was nearly 2 years ago. When I played Final Fantasy 1 and 4 for charity, I really need to do 6 at some point. That was, it was a really, and obviously this was with the Pixel remakes. It was like, oh my god, this is really nice. This is, it's the first really well written couple in Final Fantasy, and yeah, I fucking love Cecil and Rosa, and yep.
Yes, Cecil and Rosa.
Yep, it's yeah. I mean, this is just a nice piece of music. It's a nice rendition. Obviously, it's Final Fantasy IV, so there's like 10 or 15. There's like a few versions of this. The version of the Piano Collections is also pretty nice.
Yeah, the Piano Collections is great. The Celtic Moon version is good. I do recommend Celtic Moon, the album itself, because it is it is amazing. Like all the way back then, they got a band went, hey, do you want to maybe do this thing? And they're like, sure, if you pay us. And they did, and they made it, and it's really good. You break this out and Xenogears Creed during this time of year at St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we will have passed it by the time this releases, but right now we're just before it, and that reminds me to break out Xenogears Creed and the Final Fantasy IV Celtic Moon. Like I know, stupid American, Boston Celtic Moon. Yes.
Yeah. The number of versions of this is like, there are 2 different versions with vocals on it, and various arrangements.
When they released DS, they made a pop version of it as a single for Final Fantasy IV DS. It's really the full version with the orchestra is really fucking good. I don't like the music video look for the music video on YouTube, and you'll find it, and you'll get the best version of it. The in-game version, or like the version at least I got on the album, it's different. They left off like the ending point, and it just kind of like ends solemnly. I don't know if they did that for the choice, but if you listen to the music version, you'll get the best version of the pop single theme of love from Final Fantasy IV from Final Fantasy IV DS. So in my deep pockets of knowledge, here you go. Have good stuff.
Yeah, not to be confused with either of the 2 chill out mixes. there are like a dozen mixes of this and versions. This is not even going into like the rearrangements of the versions for Distant Worlds alone. It's like Distant Worlds has 3 different like versions of this, and it's been reorchestrated 3 times. Anyway,
because like it's also in the ending theme, but Theme of Love is an amazing theme, and it is like it deserves to be a cornerstone of the Final Fantasy listening experience, along with like the 7 and the 8s that sold more.
Definitely. 4's soundtrack is the first time I really feel Uematsu went, okay, let's see what we can do with this. And then we get Vamo al Flamenco, and fuck, I love Final Fantasy 9. Fuck, I love Final Fantasy.
Okay, yeah, it is the one you would love.
Yes. I wonder why. It is a mystery.
The main character is a thief who is kind of part furry, I guess, sort of.
Yeah,
I mean, you have your Catboy in Final Fantasy 14, and he's probably just like the main character in Final Fantasy 9.
Apart from being a redhead potentially and less of a womanizer.
Yeah.
But I fucking Final Fantasy 9 is the first Final Fantasy game I completed with friends. Ironically, the same friends I went to this concert. The only thing I would say is Final Fantasy 9 sort of has the same problem it has in Final Fantasy as a series generally. Is it's sort of like, it as of late it has got far more pieces in Distant Worlds. I think over the first couple of Distant Worlds albums, it has like one track and it's this. And considering how like Uematsu considers Distant Worlds one of Final Fantasy 9 one of his favorite soundtracks of all time, is it's a little bit questionable. And there's obviously okay, we can't put everything on everything, but it would be nice to have more Final Fantasy 9.
And I can speak on that from my history. It's because like Final Fantasy 9 has like resurged in, I wouldn't say recent history, but this is more a movement that's been going on for 15 years. Like initially when Final Fantasy 9 came out, like the push was to make everything realistic and cinematic in video games, because once you had the PS1 and you had Final Fantasy 7 with, despite the Popeye arms and everything, it was trying to be the most advanced piece of thing, and it was trying to be cinematic, and it would have like moving set pieces and all of these amazing full video, motion video sections. And then you got to 8, which dealt with like realistic people and
oh god,
settings that could be used in a movie, and it was more like that. And in between you had Parasite Eve, which was literally set dressed and made by people from Hollywood, even though it is literally a video game. So they had this realistic push. And then we had Final Fantasy 9 that was trying to be retro and new at the same time, and it got good marks. It got 8 out of 10. It got Bs, but it was not the most well regarded because it wasn't pushing everything. It wasn't pushing the system. It was kind of it felt like a lark, and only people went back to it, or it was their childhood one, or like the response people. There was blowback to Final Fantasy VII being the greatest thing ever, and then there was the divisive stuff, but then there's Final Fantasy IX, which is sitting here being perfectly liked by everybody else, and then it just, that kind of swelled. So I think at this point, we had like the ones that had the biggest response, and there wasn't a lot of noise for 9, but you kind of had 9 there.
Yeah, I mean, 9 has a weird place in the series generally, because it is, it's really the last game that the original sort of trio worked on. It's the last, I think it's the last Squaresoft before they became Enix, or is that, or did that happen after 10?
Might have been a little, it would have been a little bit. 10 was probably the last one. 10 was the last one.
Yeah,
with,
10 was the last
just Square.
Squaresoft. Yeah, Squaresoft. I mean,
Squaresoft.
I think obviously at that point, Square, but 9 is really the farewell of the original team, and there's obviously a lot of callbacks to the original, to Final Fantasy 1 through 8, and a lot of it basically feels like this is it. This is an end of an era. And something
no cloud or squall shall hinder us.
Yeah, but and hey, various characters who are the archetypes of things, and I feel like this is me perhaps making a sweeping assumption. It's the game I feel that the millennial sort of audience has really taken to heart. It is very much a game about endings, for better or ill, and I love it to bits. It is probably my joint favorite Final Fantasy game.
It's also probably the one that ages the best, even if they do like remakes and pixel reversions and remasters and all of that, because it wasn't about pushing the technology, because this was the sort of the end of the PlayStation 1 as they moved to the PlayStation 2, and things got kicked up another notch before that became like old and dusty, and it has its own like aesthetics that we thought were mind-blowing at the time but haven't aged well. But so, you know, of that, it is the most well put together as a game itself instead of just a technology pusher.
Yeah, and I feel that, and the soundtrack of that is, you know, far more back towards, ironically, is, you know, far more back towards a typical symphonic sound, which, you know, again is questionable as why more of it hasn't ended up in the Distant World soundtrack. Perhaps Uematsu is quite protective of his favourite Final Fantasy soundtrack.
It is, and, you know, I will kind of bookend this with, like, I mean, not this discussion, but like the whole thing with my experience at Uematsu's birthday. So,
absolutely. No,
I will say his favorite track, that he's ever composed, was from Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah.
So I'll just put that.
Does not surprise me. Does not surprise me. Moving back to Final Fantasy VIII. Love Grows is fine.
It's pretty. It's nice.
It's pretty. It's a nice
I wish I bought the couple that it's describing.
Yeah.
I like my biggest thing with 8 is it can't convince me of everything because all of the characters are different things at different moments, and when it comes together, it's supposed to bring it all together, and it doesn't for me.
No. Fair enough.
So,
I mean,
you know, the track itself is good. Like,
Again, I think this is the thing with 8 soundtrack, is 8 soundtrack does prove, as I said earlier, you know, it can be a Final Fantasy. I mean, some of the music from, you know, 13 is genuinely great, and I wouldn't give 13 above a 6 out of 10 as a game. I think.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 13 I would call middle of the road, sure.
Yeah.
I would consider 8 much worse, but it is not because of technical issues or anything else. It is just, it's one of those things you have to write long essays. Like, you know, the Spoonie experiment became famous because Spoonie did an endless essay on Final Fantasy VIII ranting about everything and why it all falls apart. And then he kind of got a little too far with it, and like he kind of had to end it. So there's a lot of things with the ending he just rushed through that I would have spent more time on, but and we don't have time on it either. But
we are not doing a 12-hour episode. We are not doing a 12-hour deep dive into why a 26-year-old video game does not work. I do not have that.
Oh my!
That
fuck!
energy.
It's 26 years. No.
Yes, we'll give that one to H-Bob.
This was when I was in my 20s, not 20s. It would have been like extremely late high school because I was working at Kmart and I bought the copy from Kmart. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, Kmart still exists, right?
We'll give that one to H-Bomb, a guy.
They didn't just bulldoze the Kmart in where I live.
Time is fleeting and play video games doubly so.
Yes.
And then we get to
aside from my flashback. One last note on Love Grows. I will say it stands out on Final Fantasy VIII because, like I said, the soundtrack is more electric and it's more, I want to say experimental, and Uematsu challenges different genres. Like, The Spy is him trying to do a Lalo Schifrin kind of 70s hour-long drama theme. Like, it's got the Waka Chiwaka, and it's got the hi-hats and the cymbals, which I guess are still hi-hats, but you get the idea. And it tries to do a lot more, you know, electric. It tries to do a lot more, and the simple themes are a bit few and far between. And this is like a simple, very pretty theme. So
yeah, it's nice.
I think that's why it stands out between like the choirs going to war and everything else on 8 soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fine. It's a nice piece of music. What comes next is the piece de resistance. One of the 2 pieces of resistance. Drake, Maria, and Draco is arguably one of the most ambitious pieces of video game music ever put to a game.
And the thing is, the other 2 ambitious tracks are on Final Fantasy VI soundtrack as well. At least in the Super Nintendo era. We can argue about there are certain things, but from this is going above and beyond anything you had ever experienced in a video game, beyond the CD ones, which could actually record music into. This is one of the most ambitious. They are trying to put an actual opera performance into a Super Nintendo game, which while the Super Nintendo does allow samples, and it's a sample based, if you wanted to put a song, there wouldn't. That would take up most of the disc. I don't want to say, or not most of the disc, the cartridge, because I don't want to say this is the first time somebody put a song, because it has been done before and later, but they would make up a outsized portion of a 24 to 32 megabit cards, which are extremely expensive to make.
Yeah,
they might have gotten cheaper by the end when we're doing Revolution X and we're getting samples of Aerosmith. For this sake, it would be the end of the Super Nintendo era where we get the Tales of game where we would actually get a J-pop song with lyrics into it, but the lyrics would be tinny. So, but in this point, what Uematsu is doing is unheard of.
Yes, so a little bit of background to this before we dive into it. So, this is an actual in-game opera called. Now it's obviously got the unofficial title. I don't know what this title.
I don't think it does. I don't think it has a title, and
occasionally referred to as the Dream Oath. Anyway, so in game you are Celes. You are basically infiltrating an opera to basically get an airship from Setsu, who is one of my favorite characters in the entire series. Basically, Setsu is horribly in love with the opera singer Maria. You have to sing an opera to seduce this man. There's also an octopus.
And also. She isn't a singer. She is a general. Nope. She is a general, not some opera floozy, as the original translation would say. And she has to put this together in an extremely short amount of time.
Yeah.
And it comes in this mini game where I guess you get soft openings, because if you screw it up, you get multiple chances to redo it. Yeah. Because the show runs for days.
Yeah. So there's a full opera.
So it is goofy. It is intentionally made to be goofy, and it does play on this at the beginning when Draco starts singing. It's like whoa, 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 and you could just hear Uematsu pressing the keys of these various presets and the various tones.
Yeah. So this was actually this was using a piece of thing in the Super Nintendo thing called the SPC 700 sound format, which is basically, as I said, this was pushing the cartridge to its absolute limit. I mean, audio synthesis, even at the point of the 32-bit era, was not 16-bit era was not particularly common. This is, a good chunk of an opera rendered onto a SNES, a Super Nintendo cartridge.
And this is I don't believe it was the largest one. I believe it was 24 meg. They didn't get to 32 meg until Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
I believe so. It wasn't even the biggest cartridge, even though 24 meg is pretty big for that day. Yeah. But all of this is one file you downloaded on your computer today. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have bigger files that you have downloaded on your computer today than what they had.
this podcast is probably bigger than the entire Final Fantasy.
It is. We are at like 145 at this point, and it's like 150 megabytes, which would be 6 Final Fantasy 3s /6.
6 of them. Anyway, obviously the technological thing of this is great, but also like as a piece of storytelling and as a piece of music, it is genuinely groundbreaking. This is like, this is in this era of like 16-bit video games where people are starting to do really interesting, narrative. I mean, Final Fantasy VI is stuffed with, interesting, narrative, visual, stuff. It is, there is a very good reason why it is one of the best video games of, not just the SNES era, but probably in general.
Yeah, it is my choice for my favorite game of all time.
Yeah.
And like literally to the point where when I was in my early 20s, I had a treatment written for a trilogy of movies based around Final Fantasy VI. Nobody would ever make it, but like just the end of the first movie would have been the opera scene of the first would have been the opera scene.
Yeah,
and
makes sense.
Like it, because even though it's like disjointed with the story, it would have been the most thing, because I think it's where kind of sort of where Locke starts to fall in love with Celes, and their relationship is one of the bigger selling points of the game, especially in the last third. And it is where like Celes shows her dedication and her like strength, that she goes out and does this, and like not only like it's played for laughs at the start of the opera because they're doing all these notes, but once we get to Aria de Caram, oh god, I forgot how Final Fantasy VI Grand Finale titles it.
Aria de Mezzo Catatere. Yeah.
Catatere.
Catatere. Or Aria of Half Character.
Aria of half character, like, yes. It is genuinely moving and is genuinely like beautiful to the point where like even Spoonie and his like snarky had to like stop and like note how he cried during the opera scene Final Fantasy VI, because it is just like, oh my god, this moved me. This is beautiful. This is everything.
So they went and did it as they went and went. So you can imagine Uematsu going, hang on a minute, because this is the first time it's the second time. So Uematsu first did this as a rendition on Black Mages 3, which is the final album by his rock band Black Mages, which, is basically, this is the first time we actually got the full opera. Because in the game...
Yes. It doesn't end because due to the plot, like, due to everything falls apart at the end for laughs, and they tease a sequel, and then we are to the, like, in my screenplay treatment, it would have been the second movie.
Yeah.
It has, like, I guess this is where part 2 begins, is actually in the Ted Woolsey translation of the Final Fantasy 3/6 for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. You fight an octopus. His name is Ultros. He is one of the best comic relief characters in the entire series.
Well, also interesting of note, like I have like deep wells of knowledge on this, and it's probably going to muck up this to well past 2 hours. But Vert, like the amazing composer of the DuckTales reversion, Shovel Knights, and just just the wonderkind of Overclocked Remix, who everybody knew he was going to be a star. Now he's like a professional composer. Yeah. He did a version of the opera sequence that heavily leaned on Queen, and there is like a certain rock opera feeling to it that I feel makes sense, that there's a goofy, but we are putting our hearts into it 100%, and I feel that comes into. And there was a version of the opera done earlier. There was Orchestral Game Concert, which was done by, I believe, the Tokyo Philharmonic Orchestra or one of the Tokyo orchestras. And they did a series of these arranged albums of video game music, and it's one of the earliest versions of it. And they would do what was popular there. Earthbound got a whole lot of tracks because it was popular in Japan, and of course Dragon Quest or Sarian, a lot of the Koei games that were done by Yoko Kanno of Cowboy Bebop fame, because she did Nobunaga's Ambition, and they did arranged albums. So eventually this leads to they did the opera from Final Fantasy VI.
Jesus.
And it was pretty good, but they just stuck to the game. Like, this one doesn't have an ending either, or if it has an ending, I didn't understand what they were saying. So they kind of made a rap on it, but that existed before. And then we have Final Fantasy VI Grand Finale, where they actually got to Milan to Italy, which was an orchestra that did arranged pieces, and they did the aria itself. And as one of they put it as a bonus at the end of the PlayStation 1 kind of port of Final Fantasy VI that added in like the intro movie, but also added in a whole bunch of loading time. So they are kind of similar. I find the Grand Finale version of the aria more beautiful, but if the harpsichord is too overwhelming that they use for Grand Finale, then there's the Orchestral Game Concert version, which is great as well, but I can't find it on YouTube. I think they scrubbed it just because of Distant Worlds. I can't say that for sure, but it is... I cannot find it.
Anyway, but yeah, the Distant Worlds version is like the first time, they have the full list of lyrics, a symphonic orchestra, and yes, soloists.
Soloists, they got opera singers.
The only problem with this version is it has been superseded.
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously they went back and they did Distant Worlds 5, and Distant Worlds 5 I feel is possibly the weakest of the... I mean, all of the Distant Worlds releases are fine. They're good. They're really good
albums.
Even
though it contains what is Uematsu's like favorite track.
Yeah. Anyway, but they basically went back and they went, right, okay, Draco Maria, probably the middle bit, the most, the longest track on, well, the second longest track, obviously, the Distant Worlds 2 features Dancing Mad, the other insanely ambitious piece of, video game music from Final Fantasy VI, and they basically re-recorded the entire thing with narration, which I feel is the superior version of this.
Yeah,
it sort of it goes
needs that extra texture. I will say, I mean, like for the symphonic and the opera singer, it's great, but like for a lot of things, that this is full symphonic instead of a mixture of things, that there's some texture missing, like I said on Fisherman's Horizon, and later when they get to like things like Genova, there's obviously the electronic influences that are or just straight instruments that are missing, and you can't just make it all up with symphonic, doing weird stuff with stuff in the back that the percussion uses or something like that. Yeah. I mean, the Distant Worlds 5 version is fantastic and has both versions still have my favorite line in Final Fantasy, which is the insolent rogue knave of a Western horde sort of line, which is just obviously Ralsei is the typical bass sort of it's really it's really good. It's like it is still
very impressive. They have done this live, I think, most times I've seen Distant Worlds, but it is, when they do it, it's like, okay, this is like, you know, you're getting Dancing Mad, or this, you're not getting, well, I think they may have actually done, when I did see it, I think it would have been the 2019 version of the concert, I think they did both, which is like, that is a full half hour of Final Fantasy VI music, which is just fantastic. It's just great. I love it. It's still a, you know, a pay on to perhaps the most ambitious thing Uematsu has ever done.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
They did perform it at the his birthday party, and because they had the UNO chamber choir, and they also had like the local opera singers. Maria, the woman who played Maria, was very pregnant at the time, so either you know, Draco left Prince Rolls a gift, or Prince Rolls got a little handsy, or something like that. I know I should make too light of that, but that. It's a little detail that, you know, stands out considering the story of the opera, which is is, you know, the West and the East are at war. Draco is with the West and with his lover Maria, but the East conquers them, and like they propose a marriage to, and she doesn't want it, but she eventually feels she might have to give in, which is what the aria is about. And then Draco, of course, comes riding in on a chocobo and smashes everybody's shit before he duels with Prince Rolls.
It is an opera in the grand. It is an
opera,
Italian scheme.
Yeah, before we go like, oh, they're making a mockery of classical music. Opera was occasionally the trash of classical music. Like, we're talking about Carmen, where it starts with she stabs someone while working at a cigarette factory. So, you know, let's you know, calm down with, you know, what we're making a mockery of.
Yeah, and I think Uematsu is never been anything but sincere in his, you know, work.
No, it is, and it is 100% sincere in the way that it's goofy, but also completely pulls it off.
Completely, yeah. God, I love the opera. It's just, I got the do do do. It has got. I think that is a quotation from Sleeping Beauty, actually. The Tchaikovsky opera. Do, 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 do.
And it is very Wagner too, with the big boom boom,
big bass,
with like the big battle themes, and you know, obviously every opera is like, everybody has their themes, and it loops around that.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It is. Yeah, I feel if you had this, had to be on the first Distant Worlds thing, because it is like, yeah, look what we can do. We could do that. Swing to Chocobo. There are like again, the Chocobo theme is just fantastic. There's been like so many renditions of it.
Yeah, there are about a half dozen in Distant Worlds and A New World by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's like this. I think they've done this. They've done a Chocobo medley, which is half a dozen pieces of Chocobo music. Yeah, it's the Chocobo theme. What more do you want?
I mean, it's kind of like a 50s jazz orchestra rendition.
Yeah, it's like sort of big band sort of
big
sound.
Band. You can easily picture it in New York City, and there's a bunch of people like in like their formal office wear and hats walking around, and there's like little trains, and just I don't want to say Gershwin-esque, but there's
a touch of Gershwin in it, definitely.
There's a touch of like that kind of urbanism, kind of like jazz, kind of from like the 40s, 50s, 30s, that kind of thing.
I'm trying to remember what game Swing to Chocobo is from, actually. I think it's just a rendition they did for fun. This is like, I think, the one original track for like.
It's original. I don't doubt there's a Swing to Chocobo. There likely is, but it's different from this.
Yeah. But no, nice little fun, like, little thing. And then we get the other piece de resistance. minutes.
One Winged Angel, which has
One Winged Angel.
so exhausted that, like, I don't know what to say about it besides one little story where there was a forum back in the days when the internet was just bulletin board forums, where they voted the greatest music track of all time. Number 1 seed was One Winged Angel. The very last seed, which was 160 something or 80 something, I don't know, was Tecmo Super Bowl. Not even a single track from Tecmo Super Bowl, just a Tecmo Super Bowl in general. So to get the track, somebody had to go onto a ROM and record a track, and it was a joke because they just let it go, because if you don't press A, the quarterback will say "hut" forever. It'll just be like "hut, hut, 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 hut," and then started like 40 seconds of music, and then it ends with touchdown.
Oh boy, I can see where this is going.
Tecmo Super Bowl won, and then somebody rearranged One Winged Angel with Tecmo Super Bowl to One Winged Hut.
Oh my god. Oh boy.
And if you can find it, it is one of the greatest tracks you will ever experience in your life. I don't know if I should put it in like Google storage or something. I can send it to Thom and he can do with whatever he likes, but
it belongs in a museum.
It does belong into a museum because it was just one of those things. So by that point in the mid 2000s, it was already the biggest thing ever that everybody was already tired of it.
Oh god, yeah.
And then we have these orchestra renditions.
Yeah, I mean, by this point, let me just go back very slightly. By this point, this is like mid 2000s. One Winged Angel had already been on 4 different, like, this had been like a part of the set list since since 2002, if not before. It is one of the most famous pieces. I mean, if you haven't heard One Winged Angel, hello, how is your rock? It is basically...
The thing is, when you listen to the original, it's so amazingly quaint because it is a MIDI arrangement around an actual choir.
Yeah.
And the choir is, like, recorded as best it can because these are still, like... I don't want to... Essentially music CDs with maybe a different kind of printing. That's the kind of data we are dealing with. It is not too far removed from the CD-ROM, which were like a couple 100 megabytes.
Yeah, it's so. I feel we have to. I have to be in One Winged Angel's corner for a minute. One Winged Angel is, you know, the synthesis of a lot of things that Uematsu was doing in the sort of the mid 90s. So. Yeah, this is sort of, I guess, the sort of the best sort of extension of his obsession with 60s. It is basically the opening chord of Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze, the dun 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 of, you know, run through Stravinsky's Rite of Spring and Karloff's Carmina Burana. It is basically a prog rock song redone for an orchestra in the original game before we even get into, like, you know, the dozens of versions of, like, One Winged Angel. You know, the Kingdom, there's a Kingdom Hearts version, there's a Smash Brothers version, there's obviously the version he did for Advent Children, there's a brass version. There are too many versions of this song.
And there's probably a different version for the fighting game they had.
Yeah, I think there might be an Urgertz.
Definitely in that.
There is an the original version is in Urgertz. God bless the ring. Somehow horrifyingly. There are 3 different versions in Theta Rhythm as well. Oh my god, there are too many versions of this.
Yes. And my personal favorite is actually the symphonic Fantasies versions, they have a boss medley at the end, which is the encore, and the ending is, of course, One Winged Angel, because it's the official end of every concert. It is the encore song. Yeah. So they do that, and there is a percussionist named Ronnie Barrack who specializes in, they're not bongos, they're like bongo adjacent. They're played in the same way. Yeah. Instruments. And he has one of these instruments, and they let him do a solo. The solo goes on well over a minute. And there's even a point in the YouTube video, if you go look it up, where Arnie Roth is looking at it, it's like, okay, Ronnie, let's go.
Yeah. I mean,
it is such a, kind of a joke, but it's so amazing at the same time that it adds fuel to it, so much fuel to it, because it needed it, because, it's already done. It is already as grand as it's going to be. It is already at 11 the moment it was recorded, and the only thing you can do is change the instruments and, try...
Make it longer.
Make it longer. Because it is already at 11. It is already going to be as grand as it is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a random little tidbit. When they were doing it for the remake, this was reorchestrated by a guy called Nasayori Nishiki. Nishiki actually fell ill due to the pressure of being given, One Winged Angel to rebuild from scratch, and it's like, oh Jesus. Yeah, I mean, which is also like the version Rebirth the remake is 10 minutes long, and it's like, yeah, we've basically taken this to its logical extreme now. I think we can't really do anything with it. It's the other interesting thing about the Symphonic Fantasies version is I think in the FF section of Symphonic Fantasies, there's like a brief snatch of One Winged Angel, and then he gets upstaged by the Chocobo theme.
Yeah. That was a joke. That is literally them pulling a joke.
Yeah, it has become like it's bigger than it's so when last time I saw Distant Worlds, which had been in 2022, there's sort of like there's this expectancy. It's like, it's the end of the concert, we're gonna get One Winged, we're gonna get obviously the Final Fantasy theme, which plays at the end of every concert. They do this at every concert, and obviously they do the credits for everything, and it's like, okay, where is it? Lights go red, One Winged Angel kicks in. just it is basically the playing Freebird at the end of the concert. It's like, come on, we've all come to go, and obviously they used to have the audience take part, and when you've heard like 6,000 or 7,000 people just yell Sephiroth at the top of their voices, it is like, what? So what are you doing in here?
And I've heard Nobuo Uematsu sing it in his highest falsetto.
Yeah,
and he has also played the gong on it, because there is a gong in there, and he played at his birthday celebration. He did play the gong when he wasn't putting his own vocalizations into the song for his birthday, because it's
his birthday.
He is it's his day. He is very happy right now.
Yeah, it's glorious. I mean, yeah, and obviously One Winged Angel has like transcended video games, and it's basically there's like wrestlers who name their moves after it, and it's the Uta. You can go Earth theme, whatever. One Winged Angel is at least a part of Uematsu's legacy. You're gonna it is arguably one of the greatest boss themes of all time. And it's a perfect way to end the CD, which also started with the whole, hey, this started with Bombing Mission, it ends with One Winged Angel. We've been on a journey together, people.
And like the ending theme to Final Fantasy VII is like a little more of a MIDI like run through the soundtrack, which doesn't translate well to symphonic. So I don't think they've done that. So
no, I mean the FF. I mean a lot of the Final Fantasy games end with the hey, here's all the music, which kind of leads to the ultimate example of this, which is the Final Fantasy I think 6 ending theme, which goes through, which is insane. It's like it is 1 second. If I
Balance
remember correctly,
is restored is what I believe the whole thing is called.
Yeah, the balance restored, which is 21 minutes long.
Yeah, and that's the end video game. Like
that's it basically gives you here's all the theme.
An ending. Like I said, the opera is like might be barely top 3 in the most ambitious things along with Dancing Mad, which is
nuts.
Its own prog album. Like I think they did a re-release. I'm trying to remember if they did a re-release of Final Fantasy 3/6's soundtrack, and then they did a re-release called Dancing Mad, which had the last parts of the game, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, historians, because there's a lot of things like, I had the domestic release of Final Fantasy VIII's soundtrack, and I know I do, but it's like gaslighting me that like nobody else has it, or it doesn't pop up. The only other person is composer Dale North, who I know. He did the soundtrack, some of the soundtrack for River City Girls and River City Girls 2, and a whole bunch of other projects. But he is the only other person I know who has it, and he kind of laughs at like the cheap paper construction of it. And he is the only reason I know that I'm not gaslighting myself. So like the domestic releases of Squaresoft games before they got their own racket are like really crazy, and it's easy to like, did that exist? Does that not exist? So
I think like, I am looking at it. And it is called Kefka's Domain.
Kefka's Domain, there it is. Yeah, Kefka's Domain would be the
purple cover with the Moogle that appeared on the cover of the SNES release of Final Fantasy VI. Yeah,
because that was so big and
huge,
and all of that, and it was just like, and it is all of this. It is just, you know, like I said, it's a sample platter. It is a taste of why all of this is so good, and why Uematsu, if they ever make a video game composer Mount Rushmore, he is the one guaranteed spot.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the thing, you know, I feel the Distant World sort of thing, you know, I feel is, you know, obviously, you know, the later albums, particularly from 3 onwards, do obviously acknowledge Square Enix's other composers, but it's always going to be, this guy's music is, you know, the reason why I feel is the reason why video game music is taken seriously. You know, at least he pops another composer, but he, you know, has led that charge since, you know, the late 80s in terms of, you know,
and he does have a partner in Koji Kondo. I mean, I don't know if they know each other. They probably swing the, you know, the same scene and stuff like that. Yeah. But Koji Kondo would be the other, and he was also like who went through the same background. And then he evolved his works, like with Zelda 64 and all of that, to like more samples and make it grander and something like more, and just evolved it into this thing that is undeniable. And you know, I think that is why these are well regarded. That's why these concert series like go everywhere and sell out, and they are still going even after a decade strong.
Yeah, and you know, the fact this is now sporting 2 spin-offs, because obviously now they are doing, again, conducted by Arnie Roth. You know, one's for Final Fantasy VII alone sort of indicates to you, you know, the you know, it's not even now, okay, here's a selection of music from Nobuo Uematsu over 35, nearly 40. No, here is one game soundtrack he did. We can do a full concert on one man's work from one game which he made in 27 years ago. That's that's a legacy.
And we're mostly talking about Uematsu because the first concert. There are obviously other
definitely. Yeah.
Composers like Yoko Shimomura.
Yep.
A lot of the people who like Naozi Mizuta.
Yep.
And
Soken,
Hamazu. Hamazu, who did most of 13.
Yeah, and a lot of the real.
It is no matter what you think of the game, most people will say the soundtrack is great, and I agree with them.
Yeah, and Hamatsu's obviously now come back and done a lot of work for the 7 remake, which is that's a hell of a torch to pass. To go, okay, you're going to be interpreting possibly the one of the 2 highest the highest peaks of video game music. Yeah, that's your job now to reinterpret Uematsu's work. That's kind of that's
I am quite secret happy that Mizuta evolved from the composer of Parasite Eve 2, where hey, you're not Yoko Shimomura, your music sucks, because it's trying to be more atmospheric than it is trying to be melodic. And then now he's does some of the best stuff on Final Fantasy 13-2 or 14 or 11.
Yeah, it's nice, and I will go to bat for Masahiro Soken, who is basically, is the successor to that throne, and has produced as much as as a load of really great music, which hopefully will eventually end up in the Distant Worlds series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, well, we are at 2 hours and 20 minutes. Before we get to Princess Mononoke length, I think we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah. You had one little story to tell, Joe, I believe.
Yes. Okay, so, all right. We're just going to get, mini stories on Nobuo Uematsu's birthday. So, he had, for his birthday, they released a new track in Omaha of his personal favorite, which was Unrequited Love from Final Fantasy IX. Yep. And it was absolutely beautiful. It is one of the greatest moments of my life. He loved it. And you can even find it on YouTube. Everybody recorded it off their phone, even though they shouldn't have. Because everybody was already standing anyway.
You're listening to it. You're listening to it now. There we go.
Okay, there we go. And it's off one of the less. It took until one of the lesser, what is it, 5 or 6 until they got there.
So, 5.
I bought the track individually off of iTunes, and I still haven't purchased the album itself. But and then afterwards, I met him. I got my Final Fantasy VI piano signed because that's the one CD I had that didn't get stolen. I asked Arnie Roth about Ronnie Barrick, who said he moves to his own drum. Obviously, you've seen it. And we had Nobuo Uematsu birthday cake, which was delicious. It was vanilla with vanilla pudding in the middle, and I snuck 2 pieces, even though I shouldn't have.
And now Nobuo Uematsu has learned you have stuck a piece of cake several years ago. It's fine. We'll send him a cake if he sends us his mailing address. We can't vouch on the quality of that cake.
No, well, let me know. I know some people. I know some Kansas City bakers. I can get you some expensive stuff. Hopefully they can ship them in cold, at least refrigerated.
Yeah, you can come back to Omaha again. I don't know.
Okay.
This has been we got this has been great. I mean, I feel this has been an overdue talk about this particular album. I think we were always going to talk about this. Once again, happy birthday, Uematsu. Where can we be found online?
Patreon.com/the Thom and Joe Show. Tom spelled with an H. Or if you're British, with an H.
Yeah, and on Twitter at NotSoFinalProd. We'll be back to normal service shortly with an episode of
Anime,
some. I think
Kino's Journey.
Kino's Journey. We got some anniversary episodes coming up, though nothing till May. So hopefully we'll have another
of fun... 2 numbered episodes in like 2.5 months. Wow.
2.5 months.
And we did have an episode we had recorded. It was like we had done a great job. I had found stuff to say about it.
Yep.
Even though it was more Thomas thing, and my computer shat itself, so I couldn't save it.
We'll talking. We'll redo Nausicaa at some point as a standard numbered episode at some point because
I'm sure
it's Nausicaa. It's one of the best. It's a Studio Ghibli film. I mean, come on, we're gonna eventually do all of them. Anyway, thank you, Joe, for joining me once again. Happy birthday, Nobuo. Many happy returns. We will see you on the next Thom and Joe episode.
Yes.
Ba ba bum 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 ba da. Bye bye.
Okay. Stop.